So my background comes from, my product philosophy comes from IDEO and Lean Startup, Eric Ries. And so I think probably a fair number of people in the room are probably familiar with that. But fundamentally, it's broken into stages. And the stages look like this. You develop a how might we, which I understand some of you have done. You then make observations, and those observations are in the space that that you're in. So the market space that you're in, the product space that you're in, the consumer space that you're in, or the customer space. And those observations are centered around workarounds and adaptations. So you're looking for things that are interesting. When you look at any, I'll give some examples, but I'm going to take you through the sort of life cycle first. You're looking for things that are interesting, that pique your interest, that are based around this notion of workarounds and adaptations. What is that? A workaround is when someone or some entity or something literally has to, on a regular basis, work around a problem. So if you think about a street, an intersection, and you see a worn path from people walking through the grass at an intersection, that's a workaround. That's people who are saying, I'm not going to walk all the way to the corner, it's not worth my time, I'm going to work around it. So there's probably a solution for that. You could put up a fence, right? You could maybe change, you could have thought about that in advance, which is what we're going to try and do. And then an adaptation is literally changing the environment or changing the product. So an adaptation might be to drag a chair next to a phone booth. If there's a phone booth in a room and there's no chair near it, adapting the space, adapting your behavior would be literally changing the space. So that's what you're looking for in your observation step. Then from that, you want to draw insights. And insights are framed around a question or a statement, really. And that statement starts with some people might. So you say, some people might do this. Some people might cut off the path at an intersection. The reason you say some people might is like a how might we. So for those of you who haven't gone so far down the how might we path, we say how might we because it's a question, how. It's not absolute, might, and it is collective, we. Some people might is sort of the same framework. So some, not everyone. We're not making a global statement about everyone in the world. We're saying some folks. People, because we're concerned about people problems. Regardless of what business we're in, at the end of the day, it's probably about people. And might. So again, it's not absolute. So some people might take a shortcut. Some people might drag a chair over to a phone. And then once we have some observations, then we look for ones that are truly insightful. So what we do there is we try and say, is this non-obvious? Is it something that isn't immediately apparent when we look at the problem? Non-obviousness is really critical. It's not useful to create an insight if the insight is something everybody figures out immediately. And then, is it actionable, is the second part. Can you actually do something with it? So some people might, an insight that isn't actionable is not particularly useful, right? If you can't do anything with it, if it's like, oh, some people might feel bad about their job, that's not really particularly actionable. If, on the other hand, you say some people might not be able to get up in the morning because they don't have ready access to electricity, and so they don't have an alarm clock, they don't have any way to do that, well, maybe that's a little bit more actionable. And if you say something like, some people might trip over the ledge in the doorway because there's no way to know that it's there, well, then that's pretty actionable. We know what the problem is, we know kind of where it is and how we might address it. Then from some people might, you want to create an idea. You want to create a solution. So that's a brainstorming exercise, which we'll talk about. And then after brainstorming, you want to test it. And then you start back at the beginning after testing. So that's the broad architecture of the product design process in kind of the lean startup, how might we IDEO world. There are some tools and techniques in there that we'll talk about, and in particular, the big ones are the two phrases I just mentioned, how might we, some people might. And then in addition, being able to storyboard your solution. So once we've kind of worked together and talked about what ideas we have and how we might solve them, then we're going to make it into an actual narrative. Because if you can tell something in a narrative, it makes it way more easy to communicate to each other and to other entities that might care about what you're doing. Okay. Does that make sense? It's a quiet room. So I'll sort of synthesize all these processes together for you with a product that we launched a little while ago, not Upserve, previous company. And it was done very, very, very cheap. It was done simply, and it was done in this framework itself. So in that business, we were looking at the event market. We were saying, how might we connect people at an event in a way that is exciting and fun and enables them to communicate in a way that they don't normally do so. And that was interesting to us because our market was events, so we knew what we were doing. It was interesting to us because we were involved in the communication of the event anyway. And it was interesting to us because we figured there were lots of problems that hadn't been solved. Now, you probably have a little bit more focus, but ours was very broad. So what we did is we then went and watched people interact at events, weddings, corporate events, whatever. And one of the things that we noticed was that people take a lot of photos. We saw this. We made an observation. We said, wow, people are taking a lot of photos. And then we discovered that people had a workaround for sharing photos. They went and they tagged people on Facebook. They uploaded on Facebook and they said, hey, Bob, check this out. Hey, Jeff, I saw you in my photo, so I tagged you. This is a workaround to try and involve all the people at the event after the event had happened. And there wasn't a really simple way to connect everybody at the event together to actually let you see the photos you might have been in. So the root problem really was the people at the event weren't connected. And after the event, when you actually want to enjoy the product of that event as a guest, be it a corporate event or a whatever, you didn't really have a way to. You didn't know everyone at the event, right? Like, I don't know you, you don't know me, and so when you upload it on Facebook, you're never going to be able to tag me. I'm never going to see the photo of myself in there doing a keg stand or whatever cool thing it is I was doing. So we knew we had to come up with a solution that happened at the event. And so then we began to brainstorm. We said, okay, we know there's this problem. We know there's this behavior. People take photos. We know there's this problem. People can't share photos with each other, particularly people they don't know. So we know that there is a product living in there that we need to design. And then we started ideating on that. We came up with a bunch of ideas, and one of the ideas was, well, heck, what if you could see all of the photos right now? Like, what if you could literally see all the photos that were being taken right now? It's kind of hard to take action on. We didn't know what it looked like, but that was the insight. From that, we said, well, what if we could create a photo stream of everyone's photos in the event? We'll take your photos and your photos and your photos, and somehow we'll put them all into one large stream. Cool. Maybe there's a technology solution to that. So we came up with some ideas around that. And first, we started using social media to use sort of Twitter hashtags or Instagram hashtags to try and aggregate that data together. And then we went a little further, and we said, well, we can create an app that we distribute at the event. That's free. That's easy to download. And when you log into the event, you can just take photos inside the app or upload photos to the app, and then everyone who uses the app can see them. So it's like Instagram, but it's private to the event. Then we said, okay, that's pretty exciting. So we went and tested it. We went and made a very simple, cheap prototype. The rule for prototypes that I use is $10 in 10 minutes. If you can do a prototype for $10 and in 10 minutes, you're not over-investing in your idea, which is a thing that you definitely want to avoid. It's really easy to spend a lot of money, especially when you think you have a good idea. But if you use a rule like that, and maybe yours is bigger or smaller, but if you use a rule that's really aggressive, like $10 in 10 minutes, it will force you to look at the things that are absolutely important. If you only have 10 bucks, you're going to start to worry about things like the cost of tape or the cost of a piece of paper. It's even at $100 or even at $1,000, which is no money, it's easy to spend frivolously. So $10, 10 minutes. From there, we developed a number of prototypes, and then we began to test them. We took them to events. We said, hey, try this out. See how this works. And we watched what happened. And we noticed, okay, we started to get this group dynamic behavior where people began to take photos with the app, but they didn't have anything to do with them. They could just look at them in their phone. And they're like, well, now I want to share them on Facebook or whatever. We said, all right, we need something here that's physical and permanent that you can go and take with you. So if you can imagine the life cycle here where we just kept iterating and iterating and iterating, the end result was that we built a kiosk that could print photos from the photo stream on demand. So you took photos with Instagram or this app called Spectacle. You got to see everybody's photos. You didn't miss out on a single moment because you weren't trying to connect with someone you'd never met before. And if you wanted to keep something, if you want to take something with you, you could tap it, print it on demand. And then from there, you have like an actual product. Now, there are lots of other things in the product lifecycle that you then have to grapple with, right? Like, how do you get this thing built? How do you really get it prototyped? How do you do the electrical engineering, yada, yada. But at that point, once you have, a nice high-fidelity prototype, the other problems are a very different class of problem than figuring out what it is you're trying to design. And so then we started a small side business, and we kicked that off, and that was really exciting. So that's sort of the product life cycle, the product design life cycle.